Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this session. So I'm going to show you our early exposure to procedural pain in very preterm neonates is associated with impaired development of connectivity between the thalamus and the insular cortex. So previous studies have demonstrated that very preterm neonates undergo hundreds of painful but also life-saving procedures during their stay in the NICU. When born before term age, the first week of life represent a period of intensive cerebral maturation and thereby of enhanced vulnerability for the developing brain. So the thalamus is a relay for nociceptive pathways, and prior work from our group has demonstrated that developing thalamocortical projection may be disrupted by early exposure to pain. And subsequently, this may have long-term adverse effects on somatosensory system development and long-term cognitive and behavioral consequences in childhood and later. So we know from adult study that the insular cortex, is central for both sensory and affective pain processing. In neonate, tactile and nociceptive processing can be reliably explored by functional MRI studies. Here, Goxon and colleagues recently demonstrated that neonates at term age may have the capacity to experience more complex aspects of pain. And on this figure, we see the brain regions that are active following acute noxious stimulation in neonates compared to brain activity in adults. And their following study, they showed that the neonates might regulate pain perception through the descending pain modulatory system, which includes the insula. Further evidence show that both anterior and posterior insula are part of the pain pathways, each processing a separate modality. And more broadly, the pain matrix, which is now reported in the literature and includes the insula as well as the cingulate, both being key structures in the saliency network that is assessed by functional MRI studies. And thus, despite a better understanding of pain processing early in life, the cortical representation of pain in the developing brain needs to be further explored. So our objective was to determine whether neonatal pain is associated with development of functional connectivity between the thalamus and the insula. And we made the hypothesis that early procedural pain would be associated with impaired connectivity between these two structures. And we conducted a cohort study of very preterm neonates born less than 30 weeks gestation, and we recruited 51 subjects. They underwent 3 serial scans from birth to term age at a median age of 29 weeks for the first one, the second one around 32 weeks, and the term scan at 41 weeks. Of these 51 subjects, 36 had a very high quality serial functional MRI with a total of 69 scans. And procedural pain was defined as the total number of invasive procedures administered over the NICU stay. Functional MRI measures brain activity by detecting changes associated with blood flow. It relies on the fact that cerebral blood flow and neuronal activation are coupled. So in neonates, we use resting state functional MRI, and the bold signal, which is dependent on the deoxyhemoglobin level, is measured and then extracted in the region of interest. And here we can see the scan template at term age showing the posterior insula on the higher panel and the thalamus in the middle. Then time courses from the independent component maps in the thalamus and in the anterior and posterior insula were extracted, and then it allowed us to calculate the correlation coefficient between the cortical and subcortical areas. And here the graphs show the 3 time points from the same subject and the corresponding Pearson correlation coefficients. Statistical analyses use generalized estimating equation accounting for repeated measures, which are the serial scans, to assess the association between procedural pain and functional connectivity. And the models accounted for age at MRI and factors related to prematurity, including gestational age, duration of mechanical ventilation, sepsis, and exposure to morphine or postnatal steroids. These are the characteristics of the population, divided here in two groups by the median number of invasive procedures. And the subject with high procedural pain received a median of 320 procedures versus 100 for the low pain group. Gestational age, birth weight, duration of mechanical ventilation, and sepsis were significantly different between the two groups. And to note, this population has very limited exposure to postnatal steroid. Moreover, the policy of pain management in our NICU aims at reducing exposure to pain and limiting use of analgesics, as only morphine was used in combination with non-pharmacological methods. While examining the development of functional connectivity over the period of neonatal intensive care, we observed a significant increase as measured by the strength of the correlated activity between thalamus and anterior insula and between the thalamus and posterior insula as well. Here, the graph showed on the x-axis the age at MRI from birth to term age, and on the y-axis the correlation coefficients. The evolution of the correlated activity between the thalamus and the anterior insula has been divided in two groups by the median number of invasive procedures. And we see that the development of the functional connectivity is slower in subjects exposed to more pain, as represented in red here. And for illustrative purpose, we split the groups in two to display the interaction on the graph. But then, when we used longitudinal models to confirm our result, we treated pain as a continuous variable. And then we observed that procedural pain predicted significantly the functional connectivity between thalamus and anterior insula, and independent of relevant clinical factors, which are the gestational age, duration of mechanical ventilation, sepsis, exposure to morphine, and postnatal steroids. And this is represented by the interaction term of age at MRI by procedural pain. So similarly here, we see that the connectivity between thalamus and posterior insula, the development is slower in subjects exposed to more pain. However, this relationship was not significant in the regression model after accounting for factors related to prematurity. So with these findings, we show that robust maturation of thalamocortical functional connectivity is observed in the insula over an early sensitive period of brain development. And we see that early exposure to procedural pain is associated with the impaired development of functional connectivity between thalamus and anterior insula. These results suggest a role for this specific thalamocortical projection in early life pain processing. However, one of the difficulty when examining the impact of pain on the preterm brain is to completely disentangle its effect from neonatal illness severity. And then we address this issue by using multivariable modeling, and our findings supported our hypothesis. And moreover, the results showing a regional specificity of the anterior insula are in keeping with the prominent role these structures plays in the mature brain, as demonstrated in adult studies. And this adds more confidence in the relationship. Our prior data demonstrated structural alteration of brain development in relation to exposure to procedural pain. Back in 2018, we showed a tight coupling between thalamus and sensory cortical regions during development, as measured by quantitative T1 and FA changes. And we observed then that exposure to neonatal pain was associated with slower cortical maturation in these regions. So we then observe a congruence of results showing that early life invasive procedures are associated with both structural development and functional connectivity during a period of enhanced vulnerability for the preterm brain. Then optimizing pain management in the NICU warrants further attention as a potential avenue to mitigate the adverse brain consequences and improve long-term neurodevelopmental outcomes. So with this, I would like to thank my colleagues in Lausanne and in Geneva in Switzerland, and the group at Sick Kids in Toronto, and you for your attention. Thank you.